So we're back in the room, and some people are saying there's a bit of feedback, but it's all good at our end. You don't have your speakers on, Marty, yet? Yeah.
No, I have a tiny little microphone with just coming off the phone, my friend.
Maybe a glitch in the internet, that's all. So we'll continue on with the show. And Marty, there's a lot of new developments in whiskey here in Northern Ireland, especially.
Absolutely. We have a huge heritage of this anyway. We have the reason I call my website ulsterwhiskey.com is whiskey actually comes from this part of Ireland. It went from here across to Scotland, probably by the Christian monastic tradition, and it went across there. Then you had the planters coming over, sort of from the 1600s and so on, and then moving across to the US. And they took the whiskey tradition with them. So that Presbyterian background, if you like, we think of Presbyterians being very conservative and austere and tying up the swings on a Sunday whenever I was a kid. But back in the day, they weren't really like that. You know, they were kind of the party guys. And there's documentation saying that the ministers used to tell them off for drinking whiskey in church, which I don't see Ian Paisley ever having had that trouble, you know. But so that's why we have this real rich history, and now there's loads and loads of new brands coming up on board. They're coming about, and it's an exciting time, yeah.
Now, explain this. Bushmills is the oldest licensed one in the world.
You see, there's a little bit of controversy with this. Historically, what happened was King James I granted a whiskey license to a man called Thomas Phillips, who just happened to own the townland of Bushmills. It was for that townland. So it's playing a little bit with historical accuracy to say that it's the oldest licensed distillery. It has the oldest license, which is a slightly different play on words. But certainly their whiskey has been part of the societal fabric down there that from way back before even the 1608. I'll give you a good example. Islay, which I know you're familiar with, is the island just across the water, which you get your Lagavulins and your Lafroigs and all the big heavy peated whiskies. 1609, King James passed what was known as the Statutes of Iona, which prohibited the importation of wine to the Western Isles of Scotland. Because before Islay was making whiskey, they were actually drinking Bordeaux and Burgundy wine. It was to do with the Owl Alliance, as it's known, the Scots and the French, basically ganging up to try and beat up the English. So when he prohibited the importation of wine, well, they looked across the water and seen, well, this is what they were making in Ireland, and basically took that on board. That's really why the wine consumption disappeared and whiskey consumption went up. So again, this part of Ireland plays a huge part in that.
Now, how do you explain the difference in the spelling between Scotch whiskey and Irish whiskey then, Marty? Because I'm sure people always point that out to you.
Yes. And basically what I'll say is marketing. If you go into the likes of the Duke of York in Belfast, or the Hart Bar, or Orpheus up the stairs, you'll see all the pub mirrors, all the whiskey mirrors, and lots of them are spelled KY, not KEY. Because Irish whiskey almost totally disappeared. Totally. The Cork distillery, down in Middleton, essentially, there was only three. Technically, I suppose there was nearly only one distillery actually producing Irish whiskey at one point in the late 70s. So they spelled it EY, and then basically for marketing purposes to sell it to the US, essentially, they kept the EY, and it just sort of stuck. So there's no real reason other than marketing to sell the US.
It's almost like Santa Claus, then, is it? It's almost like Santa Claus, then, is it?
What regard?
Well, Santa Claus was just a marketing ploy.
Ah, right. I thought you meant coming down the chimney.
No, no. It's just a marketing sort of nuance.
Essentially, it was. I mean, that's why they kept it. There were variations in spelling and most things, I think, you'll find, but that was essentially the main reason why, you know.
Okay, so where we're going to head next, because when you're up on the North Coast, there's like 6 distinct whiskey regions you can actually pick.
Over in Scotland, well, but like I want to just stay in Northern Ireland. I have some whiskey here with me, and I'll maybe show you. See, this obviously is Bushmills. Okay, so we're very familiar with Black Bush. Now, this is a little bit different. This is a bottle from the 1970s. And this is one of the things about whiskey. It's kind of immortal. It lives forever. You have this bottle is as good. Well, it needs sort of finish now, but it's as good as it was when it was bottled. And don't be under any illusion when people say, "Oh, things were much better way back when." This is not true. This is not as good as Blackbush is today. Blackbush is a fantastic whiskey. So I just want to say these bottles are, you pick them up on auction sites for not big money. This is a bottle that's probably the same age as me, a little bit younger than yourself, obviously, Justin. This is about £40, so it's not much more expensive than ordinary Bushmills. So Bushmills core range, it's good. There's outstandingly good whiskies on it, and also with ones that I'm not overly keen on. But so Bushmills is it's sort of the brand leader in Northern Ireland, but it's nowhere near the size of Jameson and Middleton, which are the real big guns of Irish whiskey.
Why would that be?
In terms of marketing, Rihanna sung a song talked about Jameson, but that tagged up Irish whiskey. All this stuff really helps. I mean, one has to remember that Irish whiskey almost totally disappeared, totally, in its entirety. People know about all the different brands. They know about Paddy's and Powers and Jameson and Bushmills and so on and so forth. What they don't realise is that at one point they were all owned by the same company, all of it. So they were all basically made more or less at the same place. And that was Middleton. So it stands to sense that they're going to be traditionally the big players in the market,
Like, if you're watching and you want to get involved, all you have to do is comment, like, and share. We'll be able to see what you're saying. And a couple of guys they've tagged each other, Flanagan and Lee Bradley. Welcome to the show. If you're watching and you want to say hello, just go to the main stream on Irish Review and comment there, and we'll be able to answer your questions. Marty is, well, you're a reasonable expert on this whiskies. What's new on the scene in Northern Ireland?
Well, there's lots of new distilleries popping up. You now have 26 distilleries in Ireland. Now, remember, Ireland is taken as being a whiskey region. In Scotland, you have a number of different whiskey regions. So Isla's one, Campbelltown's another, the Highlands is another. So Ireland's just taken as one whiskey region. But locally, up this neck of the woods, you have a number of new distilleries, which are producing some of the best whiskey about, without question, doing new experimental stuff. And by experimental, what I mean is cask finishes. So what I mean by that is whiskey has to be aged in Ireland in a wooden cask. In Scotland, it has to be an oak cask, but it has to be aged in a wooden cask in Ireland. So what you're getting is much more experimental finishes. So it's what the cask contained before the whiskey was put in, and that'll impart different flavours. There's new experimental casks, etc., etc. Probably the most experimental of all of the recent ones is this. I'll just hold that up. This is Cologne, and they're down in County Down, just overlooking Carlingford Lough, and they're bringing in really unique cask finishes. This is the first one that they brought out. This is a rum cask finish. Okay, and what they do is it's basically lifted straight from the cask straight into the bottle. So there's no filtering, there's no colouring at it, there's no water added, nothing. So this is at 54.9%. So it's quite a heavy hitter. And it's actually, you can actually see little bits of wood floating in the bottle. That's just how it is. It's just lifted straight out of the cask. So they've brought out a number of different ones, 3 out now. So you have the rum cask, you have the latest one's a tequila cask. So the cask contained tequila before it contained the whiskey. And then they had a Chicholina, which is a Basque wine, which I had to look up to find out how to pronounce because I didn't actually know what it was. But this is probably the newest on the block. They are a tiny little distillery. It's basically the size of a living room with very, very small setup, but that allows them to be extremely creative. They have a wonderful range of potchie now. They're now making hand sanitizer, so good for them. Kill the coronavirus.
Now, we've had a question in from Aidan Lagan. He says his favourite is Jameson Redbreast. Yes. What do you make of it? It's pretty popular.
Yes. Redbreast is a pot still whiskey. Now, pot still whiskey is something that a lot of people aren't actually familiar with, but it's a unique product to Ireland. It's like champagne or Parma ham. It can only be, it's geographically protected, so it can only be made in Ireland. And really what happened was way back in the late 18th century, the government passed a malt tax to, I see you're having a wee dram there. Are you having a wee halfing?
Well, it's Lagavulin, but it is just a little one. Just a little one.
No, so pot still whiskey really came. They brought in a malt tax, which if you're making malted whiskey from malted barley, it becomes very expensive. So what they did was they made a whiskey made from malted and unmalted barley, and they made it. So it brought down the price. The quality of it is fabulous, but it gives it a unique. There's a spicy kick just at the end of it, but you'll hear an awful lot more about malt or pot still whiskies, I should say, as it becomes more identifiable with Ireland. But Redbreast is real quality, absolute real quality. Today it was announced that they're bringing out their third in what's known as the Dream Cask. Every year now they've been releasing a Dream Cask, which is basically a very old aged whiskey. The latest one's 28 years old, and it's finished in a ruby port. Now these are very exclusive. I think there's 938 bottles, and that's it. That's all there is. So you have to enter a ballot in order to be in with the chance of purchasing one of these. So,
how many tickets do you have in?
well, it doesn't open until next week, so I'll be on the phone this weekend and get as many people to get tickets bought as possible. They do become very collectible very quickly, so lots of people want them. You know, they do what's called flip them. They buy them, hang on to them for a very short period of time, and then put them on a whiskey auction site. Yeah, so.
All right. Well, we've talked about Killowen. We've talked about Bushmills. Where would you like to take us now? Pick. I'll do it for you. The Quiet Man. The Quiet Man. We'll go there next.
I was going to go there myself anyway. Now, this is the Quiet Man. But this is the 12-year-old sherry cask finish. Right. Quiet Man have actually went a little bit quiet, ironically. They were taken over by a big Kentucky outfit, and they have kind of went a little bit quiet, which that's fair enough. But they have. It's very accessible because they sell it in some of the big supermarket chains. Now, if you're buying Quiet Man, if you go into the supermarket, you have a choice of two. Really, you have the blended one and the single malt, which is £5 more expensive. Spend the £5. It's much better, much better. The blend is the sort of thing that you would put ginger ale or something like that into, or that kind of thing. The single malt stands out by itself. Goes really well, by the way, with salt and vinegar peanuts. KP salt and vinegar peanuts. It goes really well with them. So, Quiet Man. It was started by a man called Kieran Mulgrew, who he named it not after the film. Okay, disclaimer: this has nothing to do with John Wayne, Maureen O'Hara, and the wee man that tries to match them up.
Get off your horse and drink your milk.
Here's a good stick to beat the good lady with. No, that's nothing to do with that. This is named after John's father, who was a barman in Belfast, and he basically he kept people's secrets, so he's known as the Quiet Man. So the likes of these bottlings, they do pop up in sort of specialist whiskey shops, or sometimes online. The likes of Irish Malts, irishmalts.com. You can go there and buy pretty much all of this stuff, and they're excellent. There's a few other places, winepig.com. That's over in it's local too. There's a few other places local, and to be fair, I'm a local guy. I like supporting local business. I like supporting local distilleries and stuff. So, as I say, it's a good place to be at the minute, you know.
Okay, what are you going to let us try a taste of next? Because the Quiet Man, we're coming a bit closer to home now.
Well, a bit closer to your home. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll do this one. We'll do Kirker and Greer. Okay. Now, this is really quite new, and it's a company called Drinksology has brought this out. This is what I call a Lazarus brand. Lazarus from the Bible was risen from the dead. This is really a Lazarus brand. If you go down to, well, beside St Anne's Cathedral, you can still see the Kirker and Greer building. It says it on the roof. These were what were known as whiskey bonders. They bonded the whiskey. They didn't have a distillery, so they bought whiskey, kept it, and then blended it up or selected barrels or whatever way they wanted to do it, basically to the taste that they wanted to do. So they're kind of reviving that tradition. At one point, Kirker and Greer were a huge outfit, really, really big. They bought into a small distillery over in East Belfast, but they've revived that tradition. Now, this company, this one is a single grain whiskey. which means it's not malted barley. It's a single grain, and it's cask strength at 56%. So it's a bit of a heavy hitter. Okay, you you really need a touch of water in this. The human body's not designed to drink a spirit at 56%. But that is the another new player. So because they don't have their own distillery, what they do is they buy up stock from other companies. They'll buy whiskey from Bushmills or Jameson or whatever, and they'll get it made to what way they want it made, and they'll get it all set up. So that's what they do. Turner and Greer. So the building's still there from 1912.
Okay, I must look out for that the next time in Belfast. I haven't been in Belfast for 2 months now because we're all on lockdown.
we're all struggling not to drink before lunchtime. And I'm missing the Eurovision Song Contest, so this is normally a good excuse to get drunk.
It usually is. It usually is. Now, we had Dean Martin drop in there. He said, "Lovely green spot. What you think?" I think he's talking about Quatman Country, is he?
No, green spot's another pot still whiskey. Again, it comes from down around Cork. It's a fairly old brand, and it's a fantastic whiskey. These are classics. These are classic whiskies that have endured, what was really a hard time for Irish whiskey, and it's come back with a vengeance. And there's different expressions, different cask finishes, etc., and green spot's one of them. You've yellow spot and then red spot, or it's siblings, if you like, cask.
Now, we have a lady dropped in, Julie Mason. She says, "Lovely peated whiskey, especially hench peated, and Kilkerran, lovely stuff." Do ladies drink whiskey?
Don't be sexist now. Don't be sexist, Justin. Of course they do. Ladies actually play a massive part in the whole whiskey story. Another heavily peated whiskey is Lafroig, and Lafroig for a long time was run by a lady, by a girl called Betsy Williamson. And it's funny that the hench peated has been mentioned because ta-da! Funny, I have this one, the hench peated. Now, hench is up in Balnahench. It's the distillery's not finished yet. It's the brainchild of a man called Terry Cross, who used to own Delta Printing, and he sold it and decided that he wanted to get involved in the whiskey market. Now, people think of peated whiskies as being exclusively to Scotland. Scotland make peated whiskies. Ireland make very light triple distilled whiskies. The triple distillation makes it lighter, not as heavy on the body as you talk about. But the hench have decided that they are going to make this peated whiskey, and I have to say this is really, really good, really good. Julie knows her stuff. This is heavily peated, but a totally different expression than a lot of the ones that you would get in Scotland, where they're double distilled. This is actually triple distilled, so it's quite light in terms of body, but it's very heavily peated,
I'm with you. So that's going to open very soon. When we're off lockdown, I think we'll need to make a trip down there.
Oh, absolutely, buddy. You know me. A good man goes anywhere.
Yes, as long as we don't have to go on a boat to the Scottish Islands.
Yes, that was an experience. The day I took you over, it was fantastic day out. As our mutual friend Min said, it was his number one survival adventure.
Apart from coronavirus. Now, we've got another very valid question in here, and it comes from Dean Martin again, that little old wine drinker me. It says, Going off tangent, what does Marty think of Japanese whiskies? I know this is an Irish dram. Now, I'm going to tell you about this. I was in Fort William over 2006 for a job interview at a radio station in Fort William, and we went to the bar, and a Japanese whiskey company had been filming a commercial there, and we drank the free whiskey that night. So it was a bit like being lost in translation. We don't know what it was, but it was in a bottle. We drank it anyway.
Yes, I've been there on these kind of things a few times before myself. Japanese whiskey is fantastic in general. It's fantastic. The problem is it's a little bit pricey. It's normally very artisanally made, so it becomes much more expensive. And then also you have the shipping and taxes and all that go on the top of it. But if you take away cost, invariably on average it's really, really good. The quality of it's exceptional. There was a little twist in the market probably about 18 months ago, where they've got a little bit liberal with the regulations, shall we say. Over here, a single malt means that it has to come from one distillery. They're sort of playing a little bit fast and loose with this to keep the commercial interest of it, really, if you like, where they are they're trying to up production, and you're starting to see some of the quality probably dropping out of it a little bit. So I hope that answers the question. Japanese whiskies are invariably very good, but they're not the only new company to start making whiskey. There are more whiskey distilleries in New York State than there is in Ireland.
Wow.
England have an awful lot of whiskey distilleries coming. Germany have a huge number of them. Sweden, Austria. There's a couple of Italian ones. India. India is the biggest whiskey consuming nation on earth by an absolute mile.
Which we have first-hand experience of.
You more than I. You more than I have. Yes. But I mean, the single biggest whiskey brand in the world, I've never tried. It's a brand called Officer's Choice, which is made and sold exclusively for the Indian market. So I've never tried it. I would have to get someone from India, and I know some Indians, but they won't send it over, to send me over a bottle or go to India to try. Was probably not very good, I wouldn't have thought. I would imagine it's quite cheap and nasty, but
now, we still have a couple of whiskies to cover tonight, and we're half an hour in. Remember, if you want to get involved, comment, like, and share. And, it's dead easy to follow us. You can follow us on Facebook at Irish Whiskey Review with an E in the whiskey. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Ushki Tours. And, Marty, you're in the papers now and again as well.
Yeah, I write a monthly column for the Sunday Life, and I just pick a whiskey and do sort of 400 words on it. That's roughly what I write. I give a score for the whiskey. It's kind of hard to score things like that because there's so many variables. You could have a whiskey and some days it sits and some days it doesn't. There's a whiskey called Three Crowns that's out, produced by Dunville's, which we'll get to shortly. And it's very light and kind of summery. It's so if you're drinking it in the dead of winter when it's really quite cold, it's not really conducive to that. But if you were drinking it in a nice hot day, possibly with an ice cube in it or something along those lines, it's perfect for it. So sometimes given reviews on things and given marks out of 10, it can be a bit arbitrary, you know?
Yes. Now, we've had a question in from Andrew McAllister. He is enjoying an Amrut.
Oh, an Indian whiskey. This is a quality Indian whiskey, which is much more conducive for export market rather than the Indian markets. I have a couple of bottles of Amrit, and quite good. I haven't got an Amrit peated. I know they do a peated Indian whiskey. I don't think there's an awful lot of peat in and around Jaipur, so they must import it. But no, again, quite good. The ones I've tried are pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, where are we heading now then?
Right, we're going to head. I'm rapidly running out. We're going to head to this beauty. This, and I know you know about the Dunville factory.
I've been in the Dunville factory.
We were in the Dunville factory. You told me this. This is Dunville's cask strength 12-year-old. Finished in the PX in the Pedro Ximénez sherry cask. This was released. When was this released? A few months ago, and it sold out really, really quickly. So I have a few bottles of it. I knew this would be good. I like pretty much everything that Dunvilles do, if I'm honest. I love the quality of the label. I love the taste of the stuff that they do. They are a Lazarus brand. They brought this Dunvilles back to life in 2012, but they are extremely strict on the heritage. They're extremely fastidious about it. So they now sponsor Lisburn Distillery Football Club, which was originally distillery in Belfast, and it was founded by the workers on the Dunville distillery. So there's lots of references to this family, this brand around Belfast. So you've Dunville Park, Sorella Street was named after one of the sisters. Belfast Zoo was originally the private collection of Robert Dunville. These were major players. If you go down to what was Café Vaudeville, it's the Cuban Revolution place now. That was their former headquarters in Belfast. It was a huge plant. These guys they're down in Kirkcaldy. They also make Jawbox Gin, which is still the biggest selling spirit in pubs and clubs in Belfast or in Northern Ireland, as far as I know. This is fabulous. This is an absolutely cracking bottle of whiskey. I'll just pour a little bit out, actually. And when you pour this out, I mean, can you see the colour of that?
Mm-hmm.
See the colour of that? And this is natural colour. There's no colour being added to that. It's almost like treacle and honestly, if you could smell this from here, it's absolutely beautiful. It's got lovely velvety sort of prunes and figs and those sort of rich, almost stewed fruits, cherries. It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. The nose on it's amazing. When you take a swig of this, as soon as it hits your mouth, it just coats your mouth. It's like, whenever you've got good quality chocolate,
yes,
and it goes in your mouth and it gives you that sort of taste or feeling, the mouth feel of it. It's like velvet or really rich cream. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Dunvilles for me, and I've said this to Jarlath Watson. I was actually talking to him today about another thing. I think this will be the Macallan of Irish whiskies. I think they do everything pretty much nailed on, pretty much right. And there'll never be anything to rival Jameson. That's not really where they want to be. What they want to be is everything's really good quality and not sold in huge volumes, which means that then it becomes much more collectible. And when it becomes more collectible, people will want to collect it, and it'll become really valuable. The problem then is people will drink it. They've that sort of trade-off. But I think everything they do is superb. Their own spirit is going to be field to bottle. The barley's growing on the estate. It's the water's coming from the estate. It's distilled. It's aged on the estate, and everything about it's good. The casks that they buy, they're not skimping a penny on the casks. The casks are amazing. The cask selection's superb. I totally rate them, and that if you haven't got a bottle of this, I do apologise. You will have to go to an auction to get it and probably pay a premium for it.
That was a question that was asked by someone there. It says, where do you get them? Where are these auctions? Point them to us.
You can go on to whiskeyauctioneer.com. You can go to Irish Whiskey Auctions. You can go to Whiskey Hammer. There's lots of whiskey auctions now. Again, when you're buying these, remember you do have to pay a premium on top of that. So they can be, and postage and insurance. So they can become quite expensive. Now, I talked earlier on about the Dream Cask. What you have to do to get a bottle of it is you join a group called the Birdhouse. Now, if you go on to Redbreast website or Redbreast Facebook page, they'll tell you how to join the Birdhouse. Then you'll get in a ballot to buy these. You have to remember there's so little aged Irish stock because there was no real Irish whiskey distilleries. There were very limited amount of stock, so the stuff becomes really rare and quite collectible. So you need to be on the ball. You need to be on the ball to get them. The likes of this, this will sell out really quickly, and they'll just keep selling out really quickly. But to give you an idea of how much I rate these guys, I own a cask. I bought a full cask of this. It's sitting down there, aging away, protected by tanks. Because
can I ask how much was sent you back?
No. No. I bought it for myself as a redundancy gift, shall we say?
Okay.
Right.
So with one or two more still to do, I think.
We've one more here. One more. This is an interesting one because I want to just highlight the global influence, if you like, of this part of the world, up in Northern Ireland or Ulster, whatever way you want to call it. And this is a man called Henry McKenna. Now, he was a Kentucky distiller, and he was born in Draperstown. So he moved across and became quite a big distiller. This is he, rather stern-looking gentleman that he is. But he moved across and became a big name over there. That is it's not an autobiography; it's a biography of him. You get it down in the Ulster Scots Agency building, and it's interesting to read. Now, the original distillery closed and was then incorporated into another one. But again, at auction, you can pick up these. So this is a crook. Now, I'm sure lots of people will have seen this kind of thing in the likes of Tullamore Dew are very big on this. You'll have seen lots of these sitting about in people's houses. And I kind of like this, the fact that there's a link between Draperstown and Kentucky, and you can taste it. You know, it's not very often you can get people. You can read about connections between places, but it's not very often you can actually get to taste and have a different sensory experience, if you like, of what is going on. So I like that. Again, you pay a premium for this kind of stuff. But that is from the original distillery. If you were buying this kind of thing, there are plenty of them kicking about, but they do cost. This cost me about 200 quid. But as I say, it's whiskey's immortal. It lives forever. It's like Conor McLeod and Highlander. It lives forever. As long as you
I don't like Highlander.
As long as you don't take the head off it, you're fine. So that's really all the whiskies I want to talk about tonight. There are a few other ones that are coming along. We haven't released any whiskey yet. I'm sure most of us will have heard of Short Cross Gin.
Yeah.
David and Fiona up in Crossgar. They have whiskey stock laid down. It's old enough to become whiskey. They could bottle it and sell it, but they don't reckon it's ready yet.
What about Matt Darcy and Co?
Matt Darcy and Co. I forgot to bring the bottle over. Can you excuse me 2 seconds to go and pick it up?
Yes,
it's worth seeing.
It's worth seeing.
It's worth.
So remember to comment, like, and share to get involved on Irish Whisky Review on Facebook. If you watch the stream on Irish Whisky Review, you'll be able to comment, like, and share, get involved, and also follow us on Twitter at Whiskey Tours. So you're back in the room.
I'm back in the room. I was sitting a little bit out of arm reach. This is the Matt Darcy. Now, Matt Darcy, if you want to find out more about Matt Darcy, it was down at the distillery is going to be down in Newry, and it was quite a big concern back in the day. If you buy this is the limited edition. It comes in this beautiful box with basically the history of the whole the distillery of Matt Darcy and just how influential he was in terms of whiskey and various other aspects. Now the bottle itself. This is a 10-year-old port finish. The bottle itself is quite fun. I like this. I think this is quite funny. It's a touch of class and quite funny as well. It's like an Olympic athlete. It's got a little medal on it. You know, it's like it won the high jump or something, and it comes in a little plinth. And so, you know, when I was writing the review for this for the Sunday Life, I said it was like Burt Reynolds in the 70s. You know. Fashion fleeting, but style is eternal. You know, he's wearing like a brass a gold medallion. But this is super. I mean, you could put this on a shelf and have people look at it, and it's interesting. And the fact that it comes in this sort of gold and red box. I mean, this kind of thing. It's really. This is a quality product, and it's well thought out. And a lot of time people just want to buy a whiskey and they'll buy something fairly cheap and just want to have a drink and so on and so on. And there's lots of good low end bargain whiskies at the lower end. Black Bush is a perfect example of that. I mean, it's about £25 a bottle. But for that, I mean, it's superb quality. Now, these are the ones I'm showing here are more expensive. They are. Some of them could be, the best part of 10 times the price of your entry level whiskies. But do try them. Do spend the money once a year. Buy yourself something of quality. You don't have to drink it. It lives. I could have that for the next 20 years, and it's not going to change. So I have a bottle, I've got a 21-year-old bottle of Royal Salute that my 84-year-old aunt bought me, and I don't think I'll probably ever open it until maybe she passes away, and then maybe I'll have, I'll open it after a funeral, something like that. You know what I mean? But you can mark that. I could have a drink of it on her birthday every year or something like that. And I would remember her, and it would be part of the overall experience that whiskey should be about. That's what you're buying into.
More about the celebration, rather like champagne. Yes,
it's about you buy into the whole story. So when you buy a bottle of Dunbills, you're buying the heritage. You're buying the fact that they have tried to keep the label the same. They've tried to keep the colour of the bottle the same. They've tried to take so much stuff and bring it and refresh it and bring it forward and keep to the authentic nature of it. Now, okay, they're in Kirkcowan and the original distillery was on the Grosvenor Road, but you're buying that whole story. And when you buy into Cologne, for example, this tiny little distillery, if you ever get a chance to go there, the still's like a very big, a very big copper kettle. It's tiny, but it's well worth going to see these places. That's why whiskey tourism is a big thing, because people want to go and experience it. They want to go and see where it's from, and then when they have that drink, they can say, "Do you remember we were at Bushmills and we were just beside the coast, the Northampton coast, and on the way up we seen Scotland and we seen Rathlin Island and we seen Game of Thrones and we had a really good time, and Justin was our guide. He wasn't great, but I wish Marty had done it." But that's what you're paying for. That's what you buy into.
Now, we've had a few questions in, and I'm going to run through some of them now. We've got 10 minutes left tonight, and I want to put this one up first to you, and it comes from, if I can just see it here. Hopefully, you can keep up the recently released stunning Cologne Dunvilles. Looking forward to trying these. Are they going to be put back because of the crisis?
Well, the distilleries have really stepped up to the mark. Cologne, Dunvilles, lots of them have started making hand sanitizer because it's about 70% alcohol. And these guys, that's what they do for a living. And when people stand and they clap for nurses and the NHS and so on and so forth, maybe one of the claps, give it to the whiskey distilleries who are banging out this stuff and giving it to hospitals, to care trusts, etc., because there's such a global demand for this that the supply is just not there. And these guys have really stepped up, and they've brought it out. In terms of their overall production, it'll have an impact, but you're talking about something that lasts for 20 years. A whiskey can sit in a cask for 20 years. So a few months disruption in production is probably not going to make that big a difference. But stopping someone spreading the virus to their patients and stopping it taking it home to their kids is much more important. And I'll give them a wee round of applause.
So that maybe answers the question. Martin's also asking, what Dunvilles are you actually looking for? Are you looking for specific ones?
Am I looking for?
Yeah, or maybe he was asking what the other person was asking in Dunville. How do you get them? I think he was maybe asking replying to Dean Martin's question.
All right, it depends much more. I mean, there's Dunvilles have brought out. They have a couple of expressions that they sell all the time. There's a 12-year-old ordinary strength, which is 46%, so it's a little bit higher than the normal 40. You can find it the Friend at Hand or some of the supermarkets stock it. The supermarkets tend to get a little batch in and then they sell it, and that's quite expensive. It's £45 a bottle. But again, the difference between buying an entry-level whiskey and spending an extra 20 quid on buying a quality product that you haven't had before, it may seem like a lot of money, but it's not really. If you're just wanting to go and get drunk, fine, just buy whatever. I mean, that's if you're putting half a tin of Coke in your whiskey, it doesn't really matter what it is. Don't worry too much. Anything really will do. There's not really much you can do with that. But again, if you take a bottle of whiskey, the taxes on it are quite steep. So your tax is probably about £12 a bottle. If you're buying a bottle of whiskey at £19, by the time you take the bottle, the label, all the production costs, what's the liquid actually costing you? Pennies. So take that away and add on the overall value, and really there's a difference between paying £1 for your whiskey and paying £21 for your whiskey. You do expect it to be much better, and invariably, over most of them, it's much better. I put in that little caveat there because it all comes down to taste, you know.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to fit in all the questions here because they're coming thick and fast now. There's at least double digits of people watching at any one time. Dean Martin said, brilliant show, brilliant lesson in whiskey, well worth tuning in. And Martin McShane was saying, can I ask where the liquid is from? So he must have been asked about the liquid of one of the whiskies we were talking about earlier on.
See, the liquid, invariably, lots of these distilleries are buying stock from the older, more established distilleries. Certainly anything of any age can only really come from 3 sources, and that's Middleton. I say Middleton, I say Jameson. That's normally what people mean whenever they say that. Obviously, up to...
He was asking specifically about the Matt Darcy, actually.
Matt Darcy, I don't know where it comes from. I'm not 100% sure where they're getting this. I couldn't really tell you, really because they keep this as a closely guarded secret.
Trade secret.
I sincerely doubt if it's from Cooley. If I had to make a stab in the dark, I would probably say Bushmills. But again, I'm not sure. It's very good quality. So, Bushmills are sitting on some absolutely fabulous whiskey stock, and no doubt we'll get to taste that over the next few years to start bringing it out.
Okay, and we've had a question in from, it must be a Chateau, because it's called Little Wolf Chateau. I tried the peated hench at the Whiskey Social last year. Not a big fan of peat either, but enjoyed theirs.
Honestly, it's kind of different from most peated whiskies you'll ever have tried. Because it's triple distilled and really heavily peated, it gives it a very different sort of mouthfeel. And again, it's differences that people will pick up on, differences that people will like, not because, oh, I really, really like that. I'll give you a good example. A good comparison I have is Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart's not the best singer in the world, but he sounds like Rod Stewart. And he's always going to appeal to a certain demographic. So when you try different expressions of things, they really are. Sometimes they work for people, sometimes they don't, but that's people's personal opinion. And the likes of people who give these whiskey reviews, like myself, it's really only my opinion on that day when I wrote the thing up. It's not. I'll give you an example. There's a whiskey, and I wish I had a bottle over here. The Silky. It's produced up in Donegal, and when I opened it up, I didn't like it at all. I just thought it was a thin, watery, not very, very good one. But so I didn't try it for about 4 months. And whenever I come back to it, I tried it again. I thought, you know something, that's actually not bad. Not brilliant, but not bad. And I come back to it again after about another 3 or 4 months, and I thought, you know something, I actually quite like that. And it just seemed to get better. And it was my taste had sort of changed and adapted to it, and I really, really liked it. So it's not that expensive. It's about £30-something a bottle, and well worth trying. But don't buy that bottle and just drink it all in one night. That's what I'm saying, essentially. Don't leave it and experiment with it. Sometimes some whiskies put a little bit of water into it, put a little, teaspoon of water, totally transforms it. The Dunville's cask strength, half a teaspoon of water in a measure, totally transforms it. It makes it even better. That's the truth. Well worth doing that kind of thing with,
We've got one more question I think we've time for tonight, and it came from Little which is Dunville released 2 bottles yesterday for World Whisky Day. They're both sold out already. I think the 12-year-old Cat Soon earlier sold out for the day too. Need to be quick for the limited releases. Maybe if you want to point as to what you as long as it's legal. Pointed out here. Yes, it's not just a picture. This is not a sales pitch, by the way.
No, it's not. That's not. I have a sort of inherent bias to distilleries around where I live. I'm just that kind of person. People locally tend to get a little bit better of a review than anywhere else. I do try and be objective, but I buy into the story, and I want where I'm from to do well. So I tend to have a little bit of a bias. The Dunvilles that were released yesterday, again, another experimental cask. They do wonderful stuff, but when it's limited release, they're limited to little over 300 bottles. Now they are expensive. They're about £160 and £200 respectively for the 2 bottles that were released. By the time you would pay for postage or that kind of thing, you're talking for the 2 bottles the best part of £400. So they are expensive. There are, if you go on to the likes of Dunville's website or follow them on Twitter, follow them on Facebook or whatever, you'll find out where these are released. I know that there's people wanting to buy these, but when they're releasing single cask whiskies, there's only about 300 bottles in it. And unfortunately, the exclusivity of it puts the price up and the demand for it as well. So again, I buy a lot of stuff from Irish malts. That I find they're really, really good. There's a few other places as well. Sipsters up in White Abbey are very, very good. They normally have some bottles in. Kenny Spars in Ballymena are actually really good. The Vineyard, there's obviously the Friend at Hand. There's lots of places to buy them, but not a huge amount. So you need to kind of just stay on it. And sometimes you're fortunate, sometimes you're not.
Okay. I think we've come to the end of the line. That's 60 minutes of, a lot of people interacting with us tonight. Thanks very much for watching. If you want to get in touch, remember, this is how you do it. It's very simple. Ulster Whisky. If you Google that, it's Irish Whisky on Facebook and on Twitter. The handle is Ushki Tours.
I'll just point out, Ushki Tours is a tour company, and what they do, what we do is, what I do, is I do whiskey tastings. I do whiskey tours in Belfast where I do a walk around, point out some history of Belfast and all that kind of stuff and how it relates to whiskey, and then we do a tasting at the end normally over in McHugh's. I also do boat trips over to Isla and Campbelltown where we go over and we go and take a run over to those. Again, I do whiskey tours down to the distilleries, etc., etc. So if anybody ever wants to do that for a day out or whatever, just get in touch,
Yep, there you go. All right, thank you very much, Marty. I will leave you to that. All the best.
I've had to try and limit my drinking before going on air. So I'll have to try and make up for lost time. Okay.
All right. A very good evening to you. Over and out.
Take care. All the best.